Now grab a pen. It's time to vote. Be sure to follow the instructions on how to fill out your ballot. And don't worry if you make a mistake. It's easy to fix.
Indeed, it is time to vote. Make no delay. If you're hearing this on Monday or Tuesday and you have not voted already, pull it together and get that ballot in. If it's Wednesday or later, I sure hope you voted already. If not, we really got to work on your deadline management. It is the week of Election Day, everybody. Always a special time here at Seattle News, Views, and Brews, your coffee break political podcast. Brian Callanan here with you. I'm a host on Seattle Channel. The views expressed here are my own, and I'm with none other than Kevin Schofield of Seattle City Council Insight, the man, the myth. He's with us now. Kevin, I always say it's a special time because I feel like I'm battening down the hatches against the autumn rain and also trying to protect myself against a deluge of political advertising. Do you have your muck boots on? How are you coping?
I'm out there keeping that storm drain clear, right? So,
right.
And that recycle bin, with space in it, so that as last minute flyers come in the mail, they can go, let's. Yep, okay.
Yeah, and off they go,
But you got to rake the leaves and rake the political flyers.
Indeed. Thank you for breaking all that down. A lot to recycle here, isn't there? Thanks also to City Grind Espresso, our background noise sponsor for the audio podcast. They are back open at their City Hall location. Please do support them and other small businesses, as always. Thanks to owners John and Riley for your support. Thanks also to our patrons. We're always looking for new folks to step on board. Jump in at the $10 level. When you do, you'll get your own handy-dandy Seattle News, Views, and Brews coffee mug. And also, we can feature your photographic talents on the show as well with the mugshot of the week. Now, Karen sent in a bunch of great photos, including this one with her coffee mug proudly set on her office shelf, side by side with a Converge Media coffee mug. I love it. Two great tastes that taste great together. I'm not going to pretend that I don't see the winter holiday decorations that are up there, too, in this photo. Is it November already? I believe it is, and that's rather frightening. But thank you very much, Karen, for sending that in. Thank you to all of our patrons. Please do send in a mugshot when you can if you're a patron right now, or if you want to join us, do it at the $10 level, and we will send you a mug that you can take a photo of and be proud of. Thanks also to Converge Media. The video version of our podcast airs on Converge Wednesday nights at 7. Let's do it with Right Here, Right Now. Well, Kevin, we are recording the show just before Election Day, so rather than try to forecast winners and losers, I want to try to take it next level here. City Council Position 8, I'm fairly sure Teresa Mosqueda is going to hang on to her job there. But Position 9, we're going to have somebody new there with Council President Lorena Gonzalez running for mayor. Win or lose, she's not going to be in that position anymore. I'm looking at this shuffling of roles here. When we talk about Council President, who's the next Council President going to be? And what does that leadership role really mean? What do you think?
Yeah, in fact, there are two major roles of the City Council.
Yeah.
There's Council President and there's Budget Chair.
Too. Yeah,
right?
Budget too, which is Mosqueda, right?
And in fact, by the rules, the same person can't hold both of them.
Right. So Mosqueda is going to be leaving that role as well. Right. Okay.
Mosqueda theoretically could continue to be Budget Chair for another 2 years if she wins re-election.
I see.
Although, historically that has been passed on every 2 years.
Yeah.
Too,
yeah.
Right. So, the Council President one is an interesting one to start with. And 2 years ago, from what I've heard from many, many sources, Council President Gonzalez ended up in that role because nobody else wanted it. Right. It is largely a management job. Right. Your job is to sign a bunch of contracts, approve a bunch of checks, and manage the central staff of that includes the council central staff, the city clerk, and the city auditor's office. Right. So there's a large management contingent of that job.
And can I throw in one piece, though? I hear exactly what you're saying, and you're absolutely right. But I feel like ever since the advent of district elections, that position has held a little bit higher regard, at least in the eyes of the people who have had it. I remember when Bruce Harrell was council president, he would insist that people call him Council President Bruce Harrell. I almost feel like Council President Gonzalez is looking at that title, too, and assigning some extra.
She has done the same thing.
Yeah.
She has done the same thing.
Tim Burgess, when he held that role, he could give a rip about it. But keep going. Yeah. Your thoughts about that.
Yeah.
About that political play. Yeah.
Yeah. And, there is an external component of it that you could argue is performative. This person needs to run the city council meetings.
Right.
And as we have seen in the last few weeks, that can get a little contentious sometimes. Right. So there's a little bit of, keep playing referee that comes with that. But again, largely it's management. And then the other big job is budget chair. So as far as council president, you have to get 5 of your peers to vote for you to hold that role. So I think I think there's a pretty short list of who could get 5 votes to do that. I think if Mosqueda gets reelected, she could potentially. Lisa Herbold could potentially. I don't know. The intersection of who wants that job, and who could get 5 votes for that job, gets pretty small really quickly. On that.
Yeah,
and then who would end up budget chair after that? We'll see.
Well, let me look at another piece here. The mayor's role here. Whoever gets this job has a lot of work to do. The biggest one is, as we have talked about, trying to build a better relationship with the city council. Now, Mayor Durkin's connection with the council started pretty frosty and got pretty much subarctic, I'd say, by year 3. So I'm looking at this. I think it's important to have some push and pull between the executive branch and the legislative branch in the city, but this has not been a healthy relationship over the past 4 years. What needs to be done to fix it?
Yeah, I think you need to parse a little bit more than that.
Okay.
Right? I think the city council has been very supportive over the things that the mayor has done around COVID.
Okay. Right? True. Okay, good point.
You look at, all the work around standing up testing sites, mobile testing sites, vaccination, pop-up sites, just like a whole bunch of work around that. Even things like, the mandates. We've heard no pushback from the city council around vaccine mandates, right?
Right.
And largely, Councilmember Swan has pushed a little hard on being more aggressive around eviction moratoria and trying to do, rent cancellation, things like that. Things that are largely outside the power of the city council to do a whole lot around. That's much more at the state level. Yeah. But beyond the city council has been super supportive of the mayor and a bunch of those things. There are certainly other issues around police reform, around homelessness, and so-called sweeps of encampments, where there's been a lot more, as you said, frosty relationships between the two. So I wouldn't paint it all with one broad brush, right? There have clearly been very big points of disagreement and tension between the two, and there's also been a bunch of agreement. And I think as we look at what's going on with the 2022 budget right now, there are a few points of disagreement, but
not that many.
There haven't been sweeping indictments of the mayor for the budget that she put out. Right, she largely funded a lot of things that the city council wanted to see funded. Right.
Yeah. Well,
that and there's going to be a new city attorney. Right. The mayor's going to have to build a relationship with a new city attorney, and they, depending on who wins, there may not be a lot of agreement there. Yeah. Right. Yeah. But let's also not forget what the big tasks are for the mayor. Number one, it's still COVID.
Yeah, right.
It's still COVID, and it's still the post-COVID economic recovery, right? We're not done. We are not out of the woods on that, right? So from day one, that's going to be a big thing for the new mayor.
Yeah, I think so.
Public safety, right? Homelessness, the SPOG contract, the new regional homeless authority, building a relationship with them. So those are all big things now, and they're not going away on January 1st.
No. And I know we're talking about the eviction moratorium that is set to end on January 15th. So there's a ton of different things to juggle there. And we're definitely going to have some more fallout from the election here in the weeks to come, folks, and we will talk about it. But you mentioned the budget, Kevin, and I wanted to talk about where we are right now. A flurry of activity last week as those budget amendments came in, about 200 of them, as I understand. I want to talk about what is next in this process. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that's going on right now. The budget chair trying to balance this out. So what's going on and what's coming up calendar-wise?
Right. So we have about 200 amendments, and over 3 long days, the city council discussed them all. Yeah. And now what happens is Teresa Mosqueda, the budget chair, will go build what's called a balancing package. Right. The city council has to pass a balanced budget. The mayor gave them a proposed balanced budget to start, and now Mosqueda is going to pick a set of amendments that she thinks A, have consensus support among her colleagues, and B, continue to maintain a balanced budget, right? And so that's going to get rolled out on November 10th. And then they're going to discuss that on November 12th. And there's about a week for the city council members to propose additional amendments, basically a second round of amendments to that. And at that point, any additional amendments have to be what they call self-balancing. Right?
Yes, right.
If they want to spend more on something, they have to take money away from something else.
Right.
Or find a new revenue source to cover it. Right. So what will end up in the balancing package. The details, we'll have to see. There are some very big ticket items that were discussed last week with this, including, some big asks from the Regional Homeless Authority in there, some, other things around public safety initiatives, around food security, a lot of money for continuing the additional investments in food security we've seen over the last year and a half.
Tammy Morales talking about $70 million for some social housing, things of that nature. There's a lot of different pieces playing in here. I guess I wanted to make sure I got into one piece of it, though, because I think, again, with the advent of district elections out there, a lot of different earmarks, too. And there's a lot to talk about here, Kevin. If you want to branch off into a few of them, please do. But I thought because there's a ton, but I thought it was very interesting, a piece that you put on Seattle City Council Insight, or you've been talking about it on Twitter for sure. This idea of all the different sidewalks in our city and how far behind we are on fixing those. And this report that came in from the city auditor saying 46% of our sidewalks are in fair, poor, or very poor condition and would cost $500 million to fix. There's a lot of different needs out there is kind of where I'm getting with this.
Oh, yeah. And this, so that report came out basically as the council was finishing their budget discussions last week.
Right.
And one of the things they did discuss, is put forward by Councilmember Peterson, was putting more money into major maintenance for our bridges. And there was an auditor's report like the sidewalk one that came out a couple years back that said, we've got a backlog of about $380 million of major maintenance on bridges, right? And we have a large set of our bridges that are in fair or poor condition as well, right? So, you put these together and we're getting close to like $900 million, almost $1 billion of backlog in transportation infrastructure. And, at the same time, the city council, in the very south area of the city and in the very north area of the city, we have large neighborhoods with no sidewalks at all, right? And so there are people in city council that want to push for very reasonable equity reasons to build out more sidewalks, right? Not just fix the ones that we have, but build more. And that's an important thing to go do, but it just continues to compound this problem, right? And so we've got this enormous backlog, and one of the concerns that I have now is, oh great, now we have $500 million of sidewalk work that we need to do, and $384 million of bridge work that we need to do. Are these going to be pitted against each other?
Right. Yeah, where it goes first.
Is that what we're going to see coming out of this?
Boy.
So, difficult decisions, and that's not something that the city council is going to solve. They're not going to find $1 billion in the 2022 budget. This is a multi-year problem. Peterson has proposed, with support from Herbold, for $100 million bond. Because bond interest rates are super low right now.
Right. To get started on this work.
That we get started on some of this, and it's a good jobs program as well, right? Let's put a bunch of people to work. But that is just a tip of the iceberg for how big the problem is with both bridges and sidewalks.
Yeah. And thank you for breaking that down, Kevin. I know there's a lot more to cover here in terms of the budget. Maybe we can dive into one tiny piece of it here. I thought that this basic idea that the mayor had proposed when it comes to jumpstart payroll tax funding, she had talked about taking some of that payroll tax funding, putting it in some other places, replacing that funding with some federal dollars. I know the council's budget chair, Teresa Mosqueda, doesn't really like that idea. That feels like a very basic dollars and cents thing that the council's working on right off the top of this.
Yeah. So what she has proposed in her omnibus amendment for this basically just swaps, what the mayor had done in her proposed budget was spend a lot of the federal ARPA funding that they got on the things that were supposed to be covered by the payroll tax revenues, and then spent the payroll tax revenues on some other things. And Mosqueda basically just swapped that. She said, at the end of the day, everything that was getting funded before is still getting funded with either of those two. I'm just going to swap $60 million from one and $60 million from the other, so they're paying. And that way, I can say very clearly, we're following to the letter of the spending plan and in the payroll tax. Right. And this is Mosqueda's signature legislation.
Big deal.
Right? Yep. And she is. She never misses an opportunity to put in a plug for, jumpstart payroll tax. And she, is very, very protective and, you could possibly say defensive about it.
Sure.
Right. And this is how she's chosen to to protect it at this point.
Yeah.
She clearly feels that this is a necessary step to make sure that for this coming year and for future years that they follow the spending plan.
To show that continued support for it in the years ahead. Thanks for that. We're going to have a lot more in the budget in weeks ahead here, folks, but I want to move on to something next. Why would elected officials support the idea of repealing a helmet law for cyclists? We're going to break it down with, now hear this. Well, in case you missed it, folks, there was a very interesting policy discussion happening at the King County Board of Health last week. At issue, should the county repeal its bike helmet law? The data shows it is not equally enforced in communities of color and with people who are homeless. Here's what the board chair, Joe McDermott, said about this issue last week.
This is not a conversation about the values of helmets. We know helmets save lives. The board is taking up this conversation to address how we ensure helmet access and use, and if law enforcement is an appropriate tool to achieve widespread helmet use.
So, Kevin, last week, the board eventually voted to delay its vote on this to get some more community input on this issue. But this is one of those real double take kind of stories for me. We're talking about a health board here that voted to ban the use of trans fats in our food. But now they're saying, let's take the bike helmet law off the books, replace it with a non-binding resolution. Your thoughts on this one?
So this is a weird world that we're getting into right now, right? So first of all, we should say the bias enforcement in the helmet law is real. There's real data that backs
Very
that up,
true.
right? And and it matches bias enforcement we've seen on other traffic laws and on drug laws, like marijuana and
possession,
other small drug possession, those things, right? So those biases are very real. It is interesting to see that sort of the logic that people following is this law is being enforced in a biased way, therefore we must repeal the law. Right? That
Throwing
seems
out
like
the
a
baby with the
weird jump
bathwater
to,
for me.
and I think some of the quote you just said that you just played sort of placed the notion of like, well, have we really tried hard to make sure that to see if we can enforce this in a way that's not biased? Right? And so then when you dig a little deeper, you see here, and it's something we've seen in other places as well, like the marijuana laws, that there's an advocacy community that wants the helmet law to go away because they believe that it discourages biking. Right. So and there's kind of a trail you can follow down through this, right? So a lot of the transportation, other kinds of infrastructure that we see in the city, is the investments in it are follow sort of how popular they are, right? So we get into this chicken and egg problem with bicycle infrastructure investments in that they don't get a lot of investment now because not a lot of people use them, right? But because there aren't a lot of investments in them, not a lot of people use them. Right. So the bicycle advocacy community, for very understandable reasons, says, hey, we want to do things that encourage more bicyclists, right? Because that will then show city and county officials that they should be investing more in bicycle infrastructure, which will then draw more people into bicycling, and we'll get a virtuous cycle going up instead of the vicious cycle going down. Right. So there's this. So I wish I could say the helmet law was just simply about this issue of, is it enforced in a biased way? It's not. There's this larger thing going on around advocacy for bicycling and advocacy for larger investments in bicycling infrastructure, which are reasonable things to ask for, but get into this larger ecosystem. And this, and there are people who reasonably believe that helmet laws discourage people from biking. Right. It's too much trouble. It's certainly been a big issue around the bike share systems.
I was going to say the ride share, the scooter share.
Do you have to bring your own helmet? Right. And if you don't have a helmet, does this mean you cannot use this thing? Right. So there's a bunch of issues. And, as I mentioned before, we've seen real parallels with sort of the marijuana laws. Right. The marijuana enforcement laws were definitely enforced in a biased way. But there was still an advocacy community that wanted to see those laws off the books because they wanted marijuana decriminalized. Not for bias reasons, but because they just wanted it decriminalized.
Right. I think about that argument so much too from 2012. It's so interesting to think about that. That was almost 10 years ago that we voted for that legalization piece there. But it's one of those deals where, okay, we want to make sure we get rid of the bias, but you can't deny that there's a corollary there that says something along the lines of, hey, it's okay to use this drug. That's not the message they were putting out, but I think that's a lot of the message people received. You saw people smoking on the streets, all kind of stuff, which you're not supposed to do. But still, that was the corollary that people picked up from it, I thought.
Yeah, and so they're saying here, hey, we still want everybody to wear a helmet.
Yes.
But we're going to get rid of the law that requires you to wear a helmet.
Yeah. Ooh, this is a tough one. I'm very interested to see what the Board of Health is going to do with this. Their next meeting.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
They're going to repeal it. There's enormous political pressure for them to repeal it. And you know, with very powerful advocacy organizations.
Yeah.
And the the nexus of the bias enforcement and the advocacy to increase bicycling, which is great and healthy, and wow, it would be fantastic if we had more people bicycling.
Yeah.
There is enormous political pressure. They will repeal it, right?
Yeah.
What they're doing right now, let's just be honest, is more performative than anything else.
To reach out.
They have to. They have to show and check the boxes that they've talked to all the right community groups first, and then they're going to repeal it.
Yeah, there's some doctor groups out there that are not happy about this one. I know that. So I'm interested to see how.
But they don't get elected officials elected.
Yeah. I suppose not.
Not in this city.
Yeah, right.
Just to be blunt for a moment, right?
No.
They're not the ones who get officials elected.
Yeah. Good point. All right. Well, the next meeting of the Board of Health is scheduled for the 18th of November. We'll definitely keep track of this one. But I also, too, Kevin, wanted to touch on some rent control legislation that Councilmember Shama Sawant is promising to bring up at our next committee meeting, which is set for November 30th, a week after the council's budget process is supposed to be wrapped up, and a week before the recall vote she's facing in her district on December 7th. Really looks like she's trying to rush something through here at the last minute.
Yep, she is. Absolutely. And she's jammed because her committee usually meets once a month, and it'll be meeting like the third week of December.
Right.
But that's the city council's recess. So normally she wouldn't be having a meeting of her committee in December.
Right.
So she's had to schedule, in the short window of time, a little over 2 weeks between when the budget process ends, and then Thanksgiving, everybody goes away for Thanksgiving, and the December council recess. Try to find a time for a committee meeting to squeeze this in when she can actually get a quorum. So she thinks she's got a quorum for this meeting. We'll see what really happens with this, because quite frankly, I don't think the other council members want to deal with this now, right?
No.
This is not a pressing. Rent control is illegal at the state level right now.
State level, it's illegal.
And this draft bill that she's written on this says it would, take effect when the state lifts their ban on this. And it's not even clear that is a legal thing that she can pass.
Right. And also has all this different infrastructure she's building in.
Oh my goodness. There's like 40 plus elected officials for separate rent control review boards for each of the 7 districts that all get together into a massive Uber rent control board, once a quarter or something. It's an enormous amount of infrastructure, of bureaucracy that goes into running this thing. So quite frankly, I don't think the other council members really want to deal with this at all. But Sawant clearly has decided that she wants to force this issue. And this is a place where, Sawant is a PhD economist. This is a place where, her biggest, opposition in this is her own field. Residential rent control has been studied just, to enormous lengths over, several decades. And the broad consensus among economists is that it's bad policy. That it doesn't work. The theoretical models say it doesn't work. The empirical models say it doesn't work. You end up, what happens is you end up trying to sort of layer on top of it a whole bunch of other regulatory things to try to fix all the problems with it.
That creates.
At the end of the day, the only thing that actually works and makes a difference is building more housing, right? And that is where rent control is in place and hasn't just simply been an enormous problem, is a place where they enacted with that a large investment in affordable housing. Public affordable housing, right?
Which is not.
So you could just sort of jump to that and do that. That would be a great thing. We clearly need more affordable housing, and just skip the whole rent control part of it.
We'll see where that goes. I know Councilmember Sawant talking about that quite a bit. All right. just when you thought it was safe to walk the streets of your city district. Everything is changing. Well, maybe not everything, but we're talking about redistricting coming up on What's Next. Well, Kevin, we saw just last week that the commission set up to revise our city district borders is now in place. Of course, the name of the final commissioner is Patience Malava, the fifth and final member of the commission. Born in rural Zimbabwe, a 2020 Bullitt Prize winner for her work advocating affordable housing. Way to go, Patience. We'll see how that works out. This group basically has a year until November 15th, 2022, to redraw the 7 city districts and get this information to the state. What's going to be happening? Which districts are going to be changing? This is all based on census data, right?
Yeah, it's all based on 2020 census data. So now that we, got it in September, we dump that data. They can look at this and, and they know, I've written a little bit about this in SEC Insight, which districts need to grow, which ones need to shrink. District 7 needs to shrink a lot, and their whole bunch need to grow a little bit. That's sort of the short thing. So we have the 5-member commission in place now. Their next job is to go hire a district master, somebody with experience in actually building these maps, to go start drawing up maps. So we'll see that probably by January. That was one hired. By March, they're expecting to have draft maps. They'll spend several months after that doing sort of a public engagement process around that. And then they, if all goes well, they will sign off on the maps, maybe after some more revisions by the November 15th deadline next year. So about a year from now, we will see what the new maps look like.
It's so interesting to see because the state's doing this too with its legislative districts right now. So there's a lot of different mapping and zoning and checking out. It's interesting to me to always see where census data is going. And I think in the city, it just sounds like that downtown area, we've had an influx of people coming in there. So that's the one that needs the biggest change we're going to see in District 7, you think?
Yeah. It needs to lose probably like 15,000 people out of it.
Okay.
A lot of people. So, I mean, you could basically cut off Magnolia and move it up into District 6, move some stuff from District 6 up into District 5, and you sort of solve a big chunk of kind of that problem. Or you cut off some of Eastlake, move that off in District 3, and move some of the south part of District 3 down into District 2 and District 1, and solve it that way. But it's the nice thing is, when back in 2013, when they wrote the rules for the council districts, they wrote into them some very specific anti-gerrymandering rules about how the districts need to be drawn. And that's going to put it in a very different place than the state and the congressional district redistricting, right? The rules are in place. And, one of those rules says that they can't consider where any particular elected official lives. Right.
It's a big part of it.
Unlike what we see at the state and federal level, there's going to be, if it all works out, no issues around districts, being carved out to preserve existing districts for existing elected officials.
Right. Super interesting. The first time that Seattle has done this redistricting process. So a lot ahead. Thanks for that breakdown here. We need to wrap up the show, and we always do it with a taste of something good to have during the Coffee Break podcast here. And today, Kevin, it is pumpkin pancake time, if I may. Check this out. So look at this guy. You can see the orange there. Nice. This is the good stuff here. My daughter made these, added a little canned pumpkin to the mix. Very tasty stuff. But I'm thinking about this. When she was little, she used to just pick up the pancakes, kind of like I'm doing right now, and just eat them right off her plate. And I'd say, hey, whoa, use a fork. Come on, what are we doing here? But I'm kind of starting to see I'm seeing the wisdom now. Like, is it a thing? Pancakes as a finger food? Get me off the ledge because I think I'm going crazy here, man. Is it okay to eat them by hand? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, if you're eating them dry, absolutely. Right? I mean, classic pancakes are more like you got to have the maple syrup and the butter and all that stuff. Right. It's kind of messy. That's when the knife and fork really help a lot. But if you're just eating them dry, in a much more traditional pancakes don't have a lot of flavor. Let's just be honest about that.
Pumpkin helps. I'm saying,
pumpkin helps a lot. Yeah, and I like chocolate chip pancakes. Those are awesome. Right.
Those work too. Tis the season.
Tis the season for pumpkin, right? I just made a batch of pumpkin ice cream last week,
man.
Which is so good. pumpkin.
Oh, wow. Okay, let's dial that one up next week if there's any left. I can't wait to hear about that. If that's a big if.
Well, it's not baking, but it's good stuff.
All part of the fun. Thank you, Kevin, as always, for the breakdown here. Thanks also to our patrons. Thanks to everybody listening out there. It's Seattle News, Views, and Brews, where you can always find out what's brewing in local politics. Subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you might listen. Again, please do become a patron on Patreon to support our show. Always appreciated. Thanks also for watching on Converge Media as well. We will see you next time.
Seattle News, Views, and Brews is an independent production of Callanan Media Services. Copyright 2021.